Thank you for joining us in this series of interviews named Meeting Changing Expectations of a Modernized Workplace. We have with us our very own Mr. Vinod Sivaram Krishnan from Industars, CIO Industars. And we also have Stephen Sicura joining us from Lenovo. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Good evening, Sumedha.
Thank you. So we have a very, very interesting topic of discussion today, where the whole pandemic has kind of, reset the stage in which we all operate from. And the dynamics of work, workplace and workforces have changed hugely, right? And we've also seen from our research, what we bring to the table is that when people are now referring to, doing business transformation, there are five most critical pillars that are shaping that. That is people and leadership, operations, digital ecosystems, pace of innovation, and platforms, right? At the center of this, as I already said, is people, right? Because companies foremost are trying to change who they are, how they operate, and how they grow, and all should be led by people. So, Mr. Vinod, we come to you and we begin with you. When we say people, and even before we go to the organization, the most interesting thing which we wish to know today is that how has been your personal journey in the backdrop of COVID, and how have you evolved, and what has been your learnings on this? Over to you, Mr. Vinod.
Yeah, hi, good evening, Sumedha, and thank you for the question. I think, it's obviously a very vast question and it is extremely difficult to kind of restrict one's view. But I think, there are several events in the course of a company or in the course of a digitization journey that take you completely by surprise, either because of their magnitude or because of their criticality or because of the way that they challenge your established business model. And I think, the pandemic ticked all these three boxes at once. Now, it's not like we're not used to change. The telecom environment in the country, I think anybody who reads the newspapers understands that it's already a pretty dynamic environment. Okay. And Indus being, the largest telecom infrastructure provider in the country, I think we were central to the debate in a number of ways. What better occasion to understand the importance of telecommunication infrastructure, than an occasion when you could not go to the office. The idea that we as a country that we as a world actually continue to operate owes a lot to the telecom infrastructure. The other delightful or interesting aspect of this is really that, Indus is a physical digital company in the sense that we have a large force of people who are out there in the field that manage these towers, that maintain these towers, that keep them going. And if you would realize that during the peak of the pandemic, these people were still continuing to operate. Those of us who are office based had the option to work from home. Those that maintain a telecom tower have no option but to go to the tower. So there were some very interesting dimensions of how do you handle that. And thirdly, I think, which is something that's common to all companies, Sumedha, is an understanding of where work happens in your company. That such an event challenges the perception of where does work actually happen.
Absolutely.
Who does that work? And what does it mean for you when that person is unable to do that? And then when we had to layer it on with this very interesting integration that we had to do of a large acquisition that we made during this time, then it got really interesting. But, to stick to the core point, I think the pandemic offered a number of opportunities, simultaneously forcing us and indeed everybody to reinvent how they work. But the largest challenge was making sure that we could continue to do what we do in the larger service to other organizations using our networks and our infrastructure.
Beautifully presented, sir, because I think if I may re-articulate that, in the pandemic times, we have always referred to the healthcare workers as the frontline workers. But I think from an organizational standpoint, you guys were the frontline workers, which people didn't reckon with. You have been there, and you were truly the guys who kept the lights on for many, the whole fact, So, and you beautifully bring me to the next juncture of our conversation is that when all of this was happening, your organization added additional layer of complexity because you were in the midst of a huge merger. It was one of the mega mergers that happened, right? And coupled with that, the COVID and all of this, so the organization's demands placed on the CIO's desk and towards you must have been huge, right? So, what were those demands, and how did you go about meeting them? Now, talking about the organizational front. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think, it was a very interesting integration with an organization that was a good 40-50% of our size and which had a very complementary geographical footprint. And it's interesting that, we were two companies in the same business, serving pretty much the same customers, but had evolved fairly differently in terms of business models and in terms, therefore, of the IT strategies and what it was that we had by way of infrastructure and applications on the ground. Now, obviously, bringing this together necessitated two things. One is bringing the expertise together, which is, what are the processes, what makes sense. And companies always look at these as opportunities to improve. Except it's extremely difficult to improve under the circumstances in which we put this merger together. Key personnel were missing. Key personnel fell ill. Parents of key personnel, spouses of key personnel fell ill. Availability was a challenge. And so it's like this jigsaw puzzle where you're trying to fit in the next piece and you have no idea if that piece is going to come into time. And a lot of responsibility then fell on my team. And fortunately, I have a lot of people in my team that are domain experts in our industry who were able to fill in the gaps. And, we were able to actually integrate these systems in a period of about 8 months from the day that we actually formally integrated. Our systems integrated in 8 months. And the reason for that is really that in our industry, it's impossible to operate without systems. If you're managing 50 towers, maybe you can do that with paper and pen. But the minute we get to the 180,000 towers that we have, our systems are absolutely essential to getting work done. The other part is that, with 3,000 employees and 180,000 towers, we work with a large network of partners who are also going through their own disruptive journeys and experiences. And, how do you coordinate all that? How do you onboard an organization along with its partners, along with its complexities into what is already a pretty complex setup? So I'd say my hair wasn't quite as gray, when we started this project. But I think the good news is really that, the ground rules of business, the knowledge of business from the IT team, our understanding of our systems and our industry helped us to patch together a number of things and find the right answer very quickly and then chase it in a very focused way. So, if we're sitting relatively pretty with, the bulk of the integration behind us and just some minor technology debt left to retire from the integration, I think that owes a lot to the idea that, the demands came, but that we as a team had the knowledge to be able to tackle these.
Wonderful. I think that's a huge feat that you have established, Mr. Vinod, because I say this from personal experience. My company, Mosaic Digital, we ourselves went through an integration when we got acquired by HT Media. Okay. And at a company of your scale, you were saying that you were done with the integration in 8 months. I can't even imagine because I'm not allowed to say it on public, but we took longer than that. So that's huge. And especially when you are responsible for not just taking care that there is no downtime in your own organizations. Your downtimes will have a huge implication on the downtimes of other people, other organizations. You're talking about towers here, right? So what you are actually addressing is not your own organization. You are helping millions others, and that's a huge trust. So there is, a huge ask on collaboration, huge ask on trust and all. So how did you go about, developing this? Because I'm sure this is easier said than done. You make it sound very simple that yes, in 8 months you did the integration, and just not the integration. You have to grow. You have to move ahead. You have to
Right.
make that 1,80,000 towers to maybe 2 lakh towers. Right. Next, that's the way ahead. So
So,
how did you go about that?
thanks. It's an interesting point because, our mission was always, if you will, to disrupt. The mission of technology. And it's a bit of a paradox, really, because when you have operations heavy companies like mine, the organization cries out for digitization at one level, but at the other level, there's a huge status quo because it's a large shop. I used to work for American companies for a large part of my career, and we used to talk about changing the tires while the car is moving. In the case of large infra or operations focused companies, retail, utilities, us, this is changing the engine while the car is moving. And we've been doing that from way before the pandemic, because every time that you institute a major change in this organization, it is a major change management effort. And we've been doing hundreds of these changes over the last, 3 years before the pandemic hit. So to some extent, I guess teams, particularly technology teams in industries like mine, are used to a significantly more disruptive cycle. Almost everything that we do, people need, but people look at it and say, not now, come back later, come back in 2 months. So over a period of time, I think a team like us develops an instinct for how do you drive this change. And so the only thing that changes is really the magnitude of these changes and how much time you have to kind of get them going. But the truth is that, our industry, our business, our company is used to change and is used to change at a fairly rapid pace. So it made it easier. Of course, to your point, it's not like there are any shortcuts to this. There is a lot of storming that goes on, when these changes hit the ground. But, when you have this organization that is focused on delivering for both our corporate customers as well as the end users who use our technology, that drives a strong focus. Because, if the organization is saying, look, I need these towers up, I need these towers running, then it becomes that much harder for any one individual to kind of put their feet up and say, we're not going to do this. The answer is we'll do whatever it takes. And to some extent, my team, the organization, the leadership, we harness that customer focus, that desire for, achieving customer success into our change management. And I think that is really the secret sauce.
So, Stephen, coming to you at this juncture, we just heard Mr. Vinod, telling us how his company has traveled the journey, and you have a larger, view, because globally you are helping, companies solutionize and, solve such intense and critical, tasks. And how are you enabling this, whole transition where you are having to deal with inertia, where you are having to, not just digitize company but modernize their IT and, help in, bringing everything together. Any thoughts around that, and any case studies that you could share with us?
Yeah, thanks, Sumedo. I think yes, we work with different organizations, and we work with companies who are leaders in their own industry. And as we are talking, and I heard Vinod, they are the Indus Towers, largest I think tower company in the world. The complexity involved in their operations is huge, right? The scale of operations, and similarly, when we look at any organization, whether they are either in ITITS, BFSI, or auto industry, the challenges would be different, but the scale, the complexity is the same, huge. So then, how we can help CIOs like Vinod and CXOs to help reduce their challenges, or ensure that what solutions we bring to the table are reliable. That's what it is. And what we have seen is that usually when these things happen, and when we have seen in the recent pandemic, there are a lot of disruptions. So what happened is that, again, as I very said, that know where the work is done, And for us, for a technology player, it is related to IT, everything related to IT, and that's where, from a client's perspective, whatever work is done in and around this IT, hardware and software, for us it is critical to help solution and solve that challenges around it. So we have with our devices, with our solutions, and with our services, I think we help CIOs, CXOs to mitigate those challenges, like the work from home scenario, which has transformed which has transformed the whole workplace scenario, which is like moving from secured place, campus, to distributed workplace, right from across the geography of the country. People are working from their homes, people are working from public spaces, from cafes, from hill station, we don't know what. And then organizations are paranoid about security. Our devices come with inbuilt security. Devices come with secured Wi-Fi. Private places, you can activate those features like anti-glance. Somebody is trying to see at the data. They can alert you. You get an alert. Then think shutters, which help you to ensure that you are not, being preyed upon by some, anybody at the, using a video. This. Then we look at what else. What about the services? Taking care of these assets. Asset management and security software. We have tied up with leaders like, again, SentinelOne, Absolute, FileWave, and we can give end-to-end managed services. So the CXOs, CIOs, organizations don't have to worry. This is our core competency: managing assets end-to-end, ensuring that there is a seamless transition from office to residence and back to return to office. Then finally, we also have something which is now, when organizations are seeing an return of employees back to office, they want something like a flexible workspace solution. The people have given up a lot of their spaces, so we have come out with something called flexible workspace solution. So which has features like workspace, what you call booking, on the go workspace booking, then real time availability of workspaces, analyzing the data of how many people are coming, optimizing the workspace solution. This is one of the specialized vertical solution. Similarly, we have edge computing, smart retail, smart classroom, and we have we have sold almost we have deployed around 300 smart classrooms with one of the public sector company in the state, in one of the north states, large deployment, and including some private institutions. Then we have managed service end to end with one of the largest logistics company in India. We also, so these are the solutions that we are offering today, and moving from smart devices right to solutions and services. So for us today, it is moving from transforming from hardware only to services, smarter services, solutions, and all of that. I hope I have answered some of your queries, Sumedha.
Absolutely, Stephen, and it's very heartening to know that how companies such as yours are coming together, and what you're delivering is like simplicity, speed, and with convenience, and that's what everyone is looking forward to. If I move to the last leg of our conversation, and we know that I come back to you, okay. This is, let the bygones be bygones. Yes, we have traveled a journey. We have some places made it through. Some places we take our learnings before and forward and all of that. But how's the blueprint of the future looking for you? What is your ask, from the future? Because if I may, see from our lens and what my research tells me, what people are looking for is not just defining what they want, the way they want it and when they want it. I think these are the W's that are shaping up how people are placing their demands to IT as an infrastructure, IT as a service, right? So how are you blueprinting your future organization?
There's one word that actually answers all of the W's that you just asked for, and I think, Sumedha, the word of the year or the word of the decade in that sense is flexibility. There's an assumption that we make when we build IT systems, when we build bridges, when we build highways, that somehow, there's no cost to changing these things. Everybody kind of assumes flexibility is free. To tell you for a fact, there is nothing as expensive and difficult to manage as flexibility. Creating flexibility when you've already built that highway system is probably the toughest job. And this is the challenge that is facing everybody in my role, not just in this country, but across the world. Everything Stephen spoke about in terms of devices, in terms of the return to office solutions, in terms of the hoteling that he referred to. These are arrangements we didn't have before. And all of these are driven by the need for flexibility. So my 1 point agenda, under which you can subsume every single program we are doing, whether it's digitization, digital transformation, is how do we make our systems less monolithic? How do we make them easier to change? Because we don't know the shape of the next challenge that will come. All we know is that there will be another challenge. And the single one-word answer is flexibility, and that is the simple part of it. Now, the complex part of it is how do you take a concept like that and apply it to those things that have been so successful for us in the past that are unfortunately not flexible by design, because you're starting now. And that is really, I think, where your individual company situation, where if you will, talent comes in, is how do you layer flexibility into what you have? How do you make what you have capable of doing things it's never done before? So to go back to my earlier point around the integration and so on, it calls for change management to a completely different degree, because some of these changes nobody's asking you for. You're creating these changes in anticipation of something that will happen and based on the learnings over the last couple of years. And now you're looking, for instance, Stephen was talking about devices. I can tell you, when you look at, our investment, for instance, in video conferencing infrastructure, much of that went down the tubes the day that we had to go to work from home. And now, compatibility with Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it is that you use is factor number one. We would never have asked for that, 10 years back. But now, you can't have a video conferencing unit that doesn't have these things, otherwise you'll be laughed out of the market. And that is really your challenge, which is, flexibility. How do you build it? How do you bring it? What do you do with all the installed base? How do you go from there to here without killing your budgets, without killing your plans? Because, the world doesn't stop. New demands keep coming up. We enter new lines of business every day. We acquire customers, we acquire towers, we acquire, locations. And that has to continue. So I think that juggling act between managing the demands of today and re-architecting with flexibility for tomorrow, that is the thing that we're all busy with.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Vinod, for sharing those thoughts, because I think that key takeaway for me from this conversation is that flexibility does not come at free, and that's a huge statement to me, because we all keep talking about it, and not just that, this whole anticipation game that which is the next turn in the story. You don't know what's waiting, right around the corner. And yes, stepping up and keeping up the game. And, it's a, organizations such as Stephens and yours, what you are delivering and bringing through, it's a huge learning and a huge takeaway. Thank you for so much for your time. Thank you for these learnings. It's really fulfilling for me to have these conversations with leaders such as you. And, over to you, Stephen and Vinod. Thanks once again. Thanks for this lovely conversation.
Thanks, Sumedha. It was nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sumedha, and thank you, Stephen. I think, it's a very understated contribution that you guys make, because, eventually I always strongly believe that, what users determine of technology is really what they have in their hands. And we're always very conscious of, how much the end user experience matters. many people think who work in organizations think, my IT team doesn't really care. Yeah, you want it, you can have it as long as it's black. You can have it. But that nothing could be farther from the truth. We always would like to have our users have a level of technology, a level of convenience, a level of user friendliness that, we would like it to keep increasing as we go forward. And it's partners like Lenovo that come up with these things that, we're able to deploy in the field and actually deliver that functionality to users. So thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Sumedha.
Thanks, Vinod. I really interesting. I heard on both the statements. One is where the work is done, know where the work is done, so useful and critical. And the other one is flexibility. People take it for granted. Flexible and flexible होना चाहिए. But flexibility comes at a cost and at a price. So I think good. I think that's. Thank you, Vinod.